Good morning. Today is Wednesday, September 4th, and this is Devotions from St. Paul Evangelical Lutheran Church in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. I'm going to take a passage today from Mark's Gospel, and Mark's going to talk about traditions. The Pharisees are going to ask Jesus why the disciples do not uphold traditions. And Jesus is going to answer by asking the Pharisees why they use traditions contrary to the law that's given. So this is from the 7th chapter of Mark's Gospel. So the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, "Why do you disciples not live according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?" He said to them, "Isaiah prophesies rightly about you hypocrites, as it is written, 'The people honor me with their lips, but with their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. You abandon the commandment of God and hold to human traditions.'" Then Jesus said to them, "You have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of God in order to keep your own tradition. For Moses said, 'Honor your father and mother,' and 'Whoever speaks evil of father or mother must surely die.' But you say that if anyone tells father or mother, 'Whatever support you might have had from me is korban,' that is, an offering to God, then you no longer permit anything for a father or mother, thus making void the word of God through your tradition that you have handed on. You do many things like this." "Listen," he called to the crowd, "listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a person that going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defile." Tradition. We all have them. I spent a lot of time in the Army, and I tell you, tradition is just a big deal, and it's meaningful. And here in the church, that's even more so, because it comes out in procedures, things that we do, and because we do them so often, they have a tendency to become very familiar. Scribes and the Pharisees were using their traditions that they had written, and probably that their predecessors had written, in order to circumvent, to get around requirements of the law. And in the case cited, to get around subsidizing their parents when that time came to be necessary. It's important to take care of your parents if they need it. But Jesus isn't criticizing the idea of the tradition. He's criticizing the change for the benefit of the Pharisees. Rules are rules, and we all have them. We have to have them to live by. But if we use the rules against other people and for our own benefit, and not just to have an equal, even, just way of relating to one another, then they work contrary to the law. In worship, we use traditions to guide us in how we go about the procedures that we follow in our worship. I don't know if you're like me, but there's been too many times in church when I'll be sitting in the pew and I'll be listening to the pastor, and all of a sudden he's saying something that I don't see how follows because I've gone off track. I haven't been focused on what he said, but I've lost the bubble. I've gone away from things that he was talking about to things that I was thinking about because I knew what was coming. This can happen in the Creed way too easily. It can happen in the Lord's Prayer way too easily because we do those so often, and I know them so well. All of this somewhat reminds me of the story that's told in John's Gospel. Jesus and his disciples are traveling through Samaria. And the disciples go off to buy food while Jesus sits by the well and rests. And a Samaritan woman comes out and he asks her for a drink. And they get to discussing who he is and what a drink means. And he talks to her about living water. And they talk about how you worship. And she says to Jesus, "You Jews tell us that we have to worship at the temple in Jerusalem." And Jesus' response, seems to me, is the answer for all of us. He says, "The time is coming when everyone will worship in spirit and in truth." Traditions aren't bad. Traditions can be really good guides. But if that's all you do with your worship, it isn't true worship. Worship has to be meaningful in your own heart. What you think of as meaningful and what I think of meaningful don't have to be the same. But the way that you worship God and the way that I worship God have to be meaningful to each of us as individuals. And so when we say the Lord's Prayer, for instance, the images that come to your mind, if they are about God and your relationship with Him and Jesus, that's good. It doesn't have to be the same as the images that come to my mind. But it can't be just saying the words with nothing coming to mind. It seems to me that's what this idea of spirit and truth implies to all of us. I don't think we go to the extent very often of what Jesus accused the Pharisees of convoluting the commandments by making our traditions that seem to just contradict them completely. But most of us don't make rules. Most of us more follow rules that were given in our church, in our denomination, in the way we go about doing this business of worship. But what each one of us can do by ourselves and for ourselves is worship in spirit and in truth. We can focus, using whatever the tool is, on our relationship with God. And it seems to me that's what true worship is. I think that's what Jesus is calling for and arguing against the Pharisees' way of doing that. But he's calling the rest of us worship in spirit and in truth. Think about God. Think about your relationship. Think about the things that are important between you and God. Because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that is important. Everything else is nice. That is important. I hope this connection between Mark's gospel and the story from John's gospel makes some sense to you, because I think traditions are something that I like, but spirit and truth are something that I need. I hope you feel the same way. Thank you.